What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Blerd Out. We are still on break week. One Piece has got like 2 more weeks, I think, until it comes back. So we're not going to have any new chapter talk. I don't really have any One Piece news this week. I mean, it's basically just been the usual stuff, like the usual Twitter, any Twitter agenda. Zoro versus Sanji, who is stronger than who. A bunch of wild stuff going on. If you don't keep up with any Twitter, it's actually really funny. A lot of the takes like they almost wrap around from being absolutely absurd to people being legitimately serious about some things. All in all, it's really good stuff. But today I want to talk about anime, and certain anime that are pretty much hyped up to be the new front runners, but are actually kind of mid. But before we get to that, a word from our sponsors. You are now listening to the Blerd Out podcast, which is available on your favorite podcast websites like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Check the link in the description or search Blerd Out wherever you podcast, and you will find greatness. Episodes are also uploaded on my main YouTube channel at Tyrant King Kuma and on the official podcast YouTube channel at Blerd Out Podcast. And of course, if you're not caught up to anime such as My Hero, 7 Deadly Sins, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, please know there will be spoilers ahead.
Oops! Spoilers.
So let's start off with My Hero, because My Hero had such a strong start. I think My Hero kind of came onto the scene where Shonen had slowed down a little bit. Like we had the big 3, and there wasn't a whole lot of commotion everywhere else. I think I don't know the exact timing, because you gotta think about things like Attack on Titan coming out, things like Black Clover. It's in that era, and the anime had such a strong start. I remember the first season of the anime left a huge impression on me, enough to adamantly recommend other people to start watching. Like whenever, because I always try One Piece first, naturally. But whenever One Piece is like the hard sell, I gotta switch to something lighter, so I'll give it My Hero. And that was also like an introductory anime where it's like, if you don't watch a lot of anime, maybe you should start here. And honestly, I still think it's a really solid beginner anime. Like, if you look at My Hero compared to something like Black Clover, I'd probably recommend My Hero. I think it's more digestible. I think the characters are better, honestly. I think that the pacing is better. I think it's just the start overall is just better. And I continue to watch My Hero. I mean, I keep up with the manga currently. It's like the latest chapters. I keep up with all that. The anime, however, has been losing me. And I think it started in the overhaul arc, where I kind of started being disinterested. Because here's the thing. The first season you have the strong build-up, and you have All Might versus the Nomu. That was crispy. That was a good entryway into the anime scene, having that fight and just establishing each character. Like that season did such a good job. And then season 2 did a really good job on building on the characters, particularly the students. And of that, Todoroki versus Deku is probably one of my favorite moments of the series, because that fight is just so crispy. But as the series goes on, I feel like it starts to lose sight of what it is, because there's a video, so this is basically where they do My Hero, and one of the things they talk about is how basically the villain of the week is pretty much the League of Villains. And you have villains outside of that. You have like Stain, who's a really strong villain that's not exactly a League of Villains person. But you also have Gentle, who is my favorite villain, and who technically isn't really a villain, but is a villain, anti-hero, whatever you want to call him. Gentle is one of my favorite characters of the series. You have really interesting characters like that, but it always just cycles back to the League of Villains. And honestly, at first, I thought Shigaraki was interesting. Like, he posed a threat, and he had a certain ideology, and I felt like him coming in reminded me of Blackbeard a little bit, because he would just show up, do some things that were in his interest, and it did. And I was like, okay, he's building to something. He's not just charging in. He's got some things planned. But as time went on, he kind of just became this clear arc villain where it's like, okay, he's going to be the in-game villain. Let's power him up. Let's kind of just remove the main characterization, because right now he's just like he's just all about destroying. But I feel like in the earlier seasons, he used to have particular goals in mind and like a way he wanted to do things. He felt like a bit, childish, naive, but he felt like a crime boss. But now he feels like generic main villain. It's nasty. I don't like it, because they basically turned him into All for One, who was the generic main villain. And it's like still kind of the generic main villain, but it's back and forth between him and Shigaraki. But I don't know. That part on the villain side really lost me, because I really enjoyed what they were trying to do with villains, especially the idea of bringing up villains who aren't just evil to be evil, who are evil for like very specific reasons. Like Stain was evil because he felt that the age of heroes after All Might were pretty much weak posers. It's like, you guys don't have the tenacity, you guys don't have the heart to be heroes, and I have to prove that to you. That's interesting. Gentle's a villain because he tried really hard to make it as a hero, and he kept failing. And not only did he keep failing, he was never encouraged. So he kind of fell to his place of villainy, because it was like, well, what else do I have? I tried being a hero. Not only did I fail, but people told me I shouldn't be a hero. And they shunned me. My family shunned me, my friends. So I guess I'll be a villain. What else am I going to do? Like, those are interesting takes. Shigaraki, like I said, he was interesting. Now he's kind of just generic. Dabi, I feel like Dabi is he's too like ham-fisted in his villainy. He started off as the cool, aloof villain that's working with Shigaraki. That was interesting. And he kind of grew into this, I don't know, it's like he wants the spotlight, and now he's just acting out to act out. He's basically being a misbehaved child. Which, I mean, I'm not going to say he doesn't have the right mentality to do that, based on his backstory and everything with Endeavor and his family. But it takes away so much characterization of his villainy when it's just like, okay, well, now he's just acting out of spite and being petty. Like, that's not cool. That's not interesting. And I mean, the most interesting villain from the League of Villains, in my personal opinion, was Twice. I thought Twice had a compelling backstory, and the fact that he didn't really have motivation like some of the other ones. Like, he was evil, but he was more twisted than he was evil. He was like mentally unhinged, and somehow still had good human qualities despite being that unhinged. Like he doesn't teeter on the realm of anti-hero. He's still definitely a villain, but he gives off the air of anti-hero because he cares so much about his people. I couldn't care less about Spinner, to be honest. Spinner feels so wedged into the story, and they keep like doing weird like sections of Spinner where we talk about Spinner and then we just forget about Spinner, and then we go back and I'm like, why are we doing this? This either makes Spinner more important or give up on Spinner. And like it kind of happens with the rest of them too. Compress is cool. He doesn't really have a strong presence though, unfortunately. I would like to see more of Compress. Like, it's that kind of thing where they had a strong start as characters, but they fall off over time. And you can say the same thing about the main cast, the heroes. Because I think Deku starts off as a really interesting MC. He starts off as this kid who knows he can't do anything, but is going to try anyway. And it's not the determination to get things done. Like, he's not a Terminator in the sense that most shonen are. He is in the sense that it's who he wants to be, so he's trying to do it. Like, despite knowing he can't do it, he's gonna try anyway, because that's what he would do if he could do it. And then he gets the ability to do it, and that starts to make him kind of boring. Like, I like the fact that he grew out of this coward baby nature, but now he's this really offset vigilante nature, which doesn't feel like Deku at all. And there's no real indicator of him going down that path. It's kind of just he's Deku and then he's this other Deku. And that's what happens to a good portion of the students, like Bakugo, for example. Bakugo used to be a terrible person. And then all of a sudden he's just Deku's best friend. And there's bits and pieces that will try to be brought together as development, but it doesn't justify the complete 180 of his character. Never was interested in Ochako. I don't think she really changed as much, but I don't think she really developed as much either. I feel like she's kind of been true to who she is, and I can imagine that there's more to her character, but we just don't get that. Unfortunately, I think she has the tax of being like not necessarily the main like Bakugo is. Bakugo's connected to Deku, but also has his own kind of like arc. Ochako kind of exists to match up with other people's arcs, which takes away a lot of her time. I would say Todoroki is doing the best as far as characterization goes. I think from what he was at the beginning to what he is now makes the most sense. I just think that he halted somewhere and he really hasn't progressed since. Like, to me, he still feels confused about the type of hero he wants to be. It just doesn't feel like a surefire, I know what I want to do now. He still feels like he's searching, which isn't a bad thing, but I just feel like he hasn't really changed since that type of mentality occurred. And then the rest of the cast is just not there. And this is a problem with just about any show that brings forth a bunch of characters in a cast that ultimately get left behind. I mean, you see it with Naruto, you see it with One Piece sometimes. It's a common thing. It's unfortunate because some of my favorites are these tertiary characters that just get no screenplay or just get random shots of screenplay that don't really portray to the character. Like Momo, for one, is one of my favorites, and she shows up every now and again, but just basically as a jobber. She shows up, she does a specific job, and then like the arc just pretends like she wasn't there anymore until the end. And that's pretty much the fate of Class A down the rest. If you aren't part of like the main, I'd say 4, you really just get jobbed. And they even went as far as jobbing the big 3. And Mirio's my favorite character of the entire series. And the fact that he kind of gets tossed around and used, I don't know, I feel like he gets used so disrespectfully. Especially for someone who is said to be the next number 1, including the pros. And the fact that, he's kind of just a jobber now too. That's insane. And it creates this air where in order to make Deku the best, you kind of make everyone else worse. And I kind of feared that was going to happen once we lost All Might and once Deku started accumulating more powers. I was like, okay, so he's going to keep rising and people around him are going to keep dropping. Because if you can look at the state of heroes now, all the pros are like in shambles. Mirko is just, they had Mirko go ham just to basically end her career. I mean, Stars and Stripes went ham, ended her career. Crust, Midnight, Endeavor's probably not going to have a career after this either. Well, maybe. But Endeavor's at that point where he's like All Might when he had his injury. Best Genist is damaged and really can't hang on that long. Like all of the main pros are pretty much out of commission. And this could be like an ushering in the new era of heroes. But I don't think the new heroes are ready for that. I feel like we got rid of the old without the new being ready. And so what, in my opinion, what we have left over is a cast that has become mostly uninteresting, a villain who has become generic, and a setting that's not as appealing as it was beforehand. Now, I will admit that the manga is picking things up. I think it's starting to look better in the manga, but I think the anime for now has just lost me. They're trying to get me back with Mirko, but I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to fall for it. But so then what makes anime kind of thrive if My Hero, who had such a good start, had these issues? Because we look at, say, Demon Slayer. Now, Demon Slayer, every time it comes around, has crazy hype. People are always excited to start the new Demon Slayer season. The thing about Demon Slayer is that once the season airs and the last episode is on, give it probably a week, no one's talking about it. Like whatever new anime is airing, that's people we're talking about now. They go back to the general discussions of like, the main animes. Like it falls off so fast. I've never seen any other anime that has such a high peak do that. And it happens every season. And to me, I feel like that's because the story isn't gripping enough. Now, I think it's too much to say that Demon Slayer is carried on animation. The animation is, of course, gorgeous, and I will admit that's the reason I started watching, is because of the animation. But there are certain characters that keep me involved. Shinobu is my favorite character. I'm very upset that we haven't seen more of her. I'm also okay with that because whenever any of the characters hang out with Tanjiro for too long, especially like the Hashiras, they die. So I'm gonna need her to not hang out with him, if at all possible. But you deal with this issue where personally I think Tanjiro is a crappy MC. I mean, the whole thing is he's trying to basically revert Nezuko back to normal by fighting and defeating Muzan. But that's all there is to it, right? I mean, I will admit, I haven't read Demon Slayer, and maybe I don't know all of the lore of Demon Slayer, but as far as the anime goes, I watch it for the fights, I watch it for certain characters, and that's about it. Like, the story drags on to me so much. Because, I mean, what's really happened in the, 3 seasons we have of Demon Slayer? I mean, in all 3, Tanjiro tried to get stronger, said he was stronger, and then an upper level demon came, mopped him and whoever he was with, and then he cried about it. And that's happened 3 times now. And I guess at some point he's supposed to be as strong as the Hashiras, but even the Hashiras struggle with the upper level demons. So him getting that strong, one, kind of crazy. I'm assuming he's going to have some crazy power-ups in the near future, but it makes him boring now. Because I kind of tire of the fights where he's like, I gotta do something. I gotta get stronger. I gotta figure something out. And he spends like 5 minutes in his head just trying to figure out something to do next while the demon's murdering a village. It's just like, I kind of wish you were strong already. I need you to be better. And yet, Demon Slayer is still one of the... I mean, I believe it is ended by now, but it had a huge run of popularity. And it even kicked off this idea of movie arcs. Maybe not kicked off, it popularized the idea of movie arcs. So, like, it definitely has its motion in the community, but it just doesn't seem to have staying power, which is weird. Does that make it mid? I mean, to me, I really wouldn't say it's like one of my top tiers. I wouldn't say it's a top tier. It might be a top 30, but, I don't know. It just doesn't stick to me. I need the story to either pick up speed or become more interesting. Because now let's look at Jujutsu Kaisen, which also had a strong start out the gate. Now, I think Jujutsu Kaisen kind of had the best of both worlds here because it had the strong start and it had the crisp animation. So it had a lot of things that brought it together in the beginning. And the story is, I would say, better than Demon Slayer's, but honestly, it's still somewhat lackluster to me. As far as characters go, I don't like Yuji. I think Yuji's boring. Actually, you know what? I think the main three are somewhat boring. Megumi is the most interesting, but he's still kind of boring to me. I'd say Maki's my favorite, followed by Gojo, Nanami. I think that's probably the hierarchy I have right now. I don't like Yuta. I like Panda. So there's characters like characters I don't like. I don't like Mai. I like Todo. Like it's on and off. And I think Jujutsu Kaisen does a slightly better job at handling a large amount of characters. But I think what they do is they pick certain characters and give them a lot more time than others. Like I think Panda, I like Panda a lot. He doesn't get as much screen time as some of the others. I think Maki gets a lot of screen time for being a tertiary character, and I love that. It probably kind of depends on the arc, but I honestly feel like there are certain characters that they just want to be popular from the beginning. So they're always going to choose those characters when hyping up or giving an arc or giving special scenes to. I keep up with the manga for JJK not as strong as I do with My Hero. So I'm aware of things, not aware of everything. But I feel like story-wise, JJK is progressing nicely. I think the anime kind of paces it down a little bit. Shibuya aside, Shibuya I think moved pretty decently. I would say the first season moved a little bit slow to the point where I don't remember all of the episodes because some of them kind of just felt like, filler. Shibuya felt a lot more central and revolved. But I think that goes to show that, you can have the animation, you can have the strong start, you can have a good strong set of characters that you keep strong. And that's the emphasis there is keep strong. Because even going back to Demon Slayer, I don't think the main three are that strong as characters. I think Inosuke is probably the strongest of the main three and probably the most liked, but I think he also gets the least amount of shine out of the three. Tanjiro obviously being the main and Zenitsu kind of being the source of comic relief, exposition, and showcasing strength. That kind of puts Inosuke at 3. The question would be, can Jujutsu Kaisen hold this grasp longer than the other ones did? Can it keep delivering high-level quality content while extending the anime? Because at this point in My Hero, I think it's died out a lot in the fan base. Of course, there's still My Hero fans. Of course, people still love My Hero. The hype for My Hero has died down so much. Whereas Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen still have their hype. And just to round it off, I want to talk about another one, which is 7 Deadly Sins. Now, 7 Deadly Sins had another strong start. People were really interested in the first season. Second season came out, people were hyped for that too. Now, after that, it started suffering bad. Like, not only was the anime having issues with just the way it looked, the production, all that kind of stuff, but the manga was getting some flack for just overall being an uninteresting ending. I think the ending of the manga was happening. And people were just like, nah, this ain't it. I'm not down with this. So it kind of hit that wall of, okay, your anime is struggling, your manga is struggling. And all the hype really just died out. Like the fight of Demon Meliodas versus Escanor the One. That's such a cool fight in the manga, but in the anime they kind of gypped it. And when you have big moments like that people are waiting for, that you kind of screw up, that kills your anime. And I haven't been back since. Like I read the ending of 7 Deadly Sins. I haven't watched past season 2 really, just because I lost interest. And I mean, Seven Deadly Sins also had some questionable content in it time and again, and that also kind of killed its momentum. But what's crazy is that all four of the anime I mentioned here were all once incredibly hyped by the community. And I think they all had that title of like the next big three at some point. Maybe not Seven Deadly Sins as much, but the other ones for sure were like best new gen, the newest big three, it's not really a thing. They all kind of held that title of ushering in a new era of anime. And I think slowly but surely they're all losing that title. JJK is still holding strong. Of all the ones I mentioned, I think JJK has the most claim to that title, but we'll see. I honestly don't expect the hype to die out, but I've been wrong before. But that's gonna do it for me. You guys let me know what you think of all these anime down below. I know there's certainly going to be some people who disagree because, in a way, I am saying that some of these anime are mid. I'm saying My Hero's anime is mid. Demon Slayer, I'm also saying it's kind of mid. JJK not there yet. Seven Deadly Sins, yeah, it's kind of mid. But I'm sure that people disagree because people like Boruto, so somebody likes everything. So like I said, yeah, let me know. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.